All right, recording is in progress. Here we go. All right. Does anyone, you know what, Brady? That's a much better camera than on the other computer.
Yeah.
You guys are so clear. It's like crystal clear. Very nice. Yeah. Color's better too. All right.
We might use this from now on.
Do I look younger?
Yes, you do. You look radiant.
Absolutely.
Absolutely radiant.
You're so good.
But you
Dave.
look that way on the other camera anyway, Beth.
Oh, you're
Come on.
so good.
Wait a minute. How about me?
You too. You're just radiant, buddy.
Where can I order one of those computers?
Hey, and all that's being recorded, so aren't we lucky?
Oh, geez.
Yeah. Let's see. Anybody have anything they want to talk about before we dive in? Anything on your minds? Anything processing from last week? Anything like that? Okay. What I want to do is start back at the beginning of this section again, and we're just going to read through quickly, not spend a lot of time, but it just so because Brady and Beth and a few others weren't here, I think it'll make a lot more sense as we move forward. So page 52, we're talking about silence in this section, and he broke that down into 3 parts. So there's 3 subsections within this second of 3 major sections. And he's taking silence and he's breaking it down into 3 areas. That silence makes us pilgrims, and the pilgrimage is a pilgrimage of silence. Silence guards the fire within. That's the one we're in right now. And then third is silence teaches us to speak, how to speak. And so we did the silence as pilgrims section, and we started this section last week, but I just want to go back and pick up the last page and a half, and then we'll go forward. So Frank, why don't you go ahead and start on page 52. And if there's anything, any of those, you know, anybody really, but especially those who weren't here last week, if there's anything that Frank reads that I don't interrupt him on, that you want to interrupt him on, please just jump in. If something doesn't make sense, if it creates a question, just jump in and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But I thought this section left a little bit hanging, so it'd be good to kind of hit it again. So go ahead there, Frank.
A second, more positive meaning of silence is that it protects the inner fire. Silence guards the inner heat of religious emotions. This inner heat is the life of the Holy Spirit within us. Thus, silence is the discipline by which the inner fire of God is tended and kept alive.
Okay, hold on a second there. We didn't talk about one phrase in this paragraph, and it comes up later as well, last week. And I wanted to hit it this week a little bit more. What do you think about the phrase religious emotions? What the heck is that? Any thoughts? Because this is really the crux of this whole section. Silence is guarding the fire within. What is the fire? Religious emotion. What do you think he's talking about there?
Would it be anything that is a hot spot for somebody, like they can't accept something in the Bible or something?
No, that's going in the other direction.
Okay.
Yeah. This is going to be something positive.
Just a furious longing for God.
That's not bad. That's not bad.
Zeal.
Zeal. Okay. I think we're on the right path. Any other thoughts? The reason that I also brought it up is that I've made a big deal about saying that spirituality is not emotion. That emotion really is physical. It's really neurochemistry that we're feeling when we feel emotion. Now, the neurochemistry is caused by deeper, causes and can be a spiritual encounter. I mean, what's causing the emotion, but the emotion itself is physical. And the reason I try to make that distinction, and I don't even know if you agree with it, but the reason I'm trying to make the distinction is that if we are basing our spirituality or spiritual progress or spiritual maturity on how we feel, then we can end up chasing the emotion, chasing the feeling. rather than the encounter, the genuine encounter that lies beneath the emotion, that is the cause of an emotion. And that we can have a genuine spiritual encounter without any emotion at all. In fact, your spiritual maturity has nothing to do with how you feel about it. It has to do with your perseverance and showing up to the discipline of it and what it allows you to do in terms of your awareness, your presence, your choices. That's your spiritual maturity, or the gauge of it, rather than how you feel about it. I always remember reading in Thomas Keating where he said that he knew people, you know, in their spiritual journey for 40 years and thinking there was something wrong with them because they didn't feel the deep emotions that they read about or heard about from other people. And yet he said they were the most spiritually mature people he knew. So it's not about emotion. So I try to make that distinction because we can end up chasing emotion like a junkie with a drug rather than just showing up to the process and letting the chips fall where they may. When emotions come, they're great, of course, but that's not the crux of it. And yet here he's talking about religious emotions. And I think you guys hit it, William and Michael. I remember when Marion was baptized the second time, because we were both baptized as infants in the Catholic Church. But when we joined the church together, the evangelical church, we got baptized again in the ocean. And mine was pretty smooth. But for whatever reason, when Marion was getting baptized, the worship pastor and I had her by the hands, and this big set of waves came in, and we were hanging on to her for dear life, and she was like a flag flying in the breeze, you know, with these waves going. It was just insane. But we got her baptized, and it was full immersion, believe you me. And then when we were sitting on the beach afterwards, she turned to me and she said she just had this kind of, it was almost a waking vision. But she said these words came to her with such clarity, it just shook her. And the words were passion, fervor, and conviction. Those three words just kept coming to her and just kind of rotating around after that baptism. And I think religious emotion relates to that. It relates to passion, fervor, and conviction. Michael called it zeal. William called it a furious, what'd you call it, William? A furious what?
Furious longing for God.
Furious longing for God. I can get behind all of that. But it is that sense of conviction. It is that sense of, I guess, zeal, but something that's animating us, something that feels real to us, even emotionally, as opposed to burnout. And I think that's the most clear distinction that we can make. When we do get burned out, when everything turns to gray, when we just feel numb and everything just seems to have run out of us, that would be the opposite of this religious emotion he's talking about. And so silence is guarding and banking the fires of this zeal, of this furious longing, of this passion and fervor and conviction. And too much output is what they're going to say is what is dissipating that. Now, whether you buy that or not, as we continue to read, he'll develop the idea further, but I think that's where he's going. And we really didn't talk about that last week. So I thought it was important to kind of get behind this idea of religious emotion.
Could you clarify what you meant there by too much output? I missed the thought there. Could you say your last couple of sentences?
Well, he's talking about words now. He's talking about silence. So he's saying if we are always just babbling away, if we are always, he's going to talk about sharing later, right? If we're always sharing, if everything is always flowing outward, if we're never just allowing ourselves to stay silent, to guard our words, to make sure that our words come out of silence and return to silence, that this is what the one quote here from Diaticus is going to talk about, is leaving the furnace door open or leaving the refrigerator door open and everything flows out. So, nature abhors a vacuum, right? So it's always going to be seeking equilibrium. If you're hot inside and you leave the door open, then eventually everything's going to equalize and you're going to cool down, or you're going to warm up if you're a refrigerator. But the idea here is that by too much output, we are losing that sense of passion, fervor, and conviction inside. That's
where does worship, like, let's look at worship. I'm coming late to the party, sorry about that. So I don't know if it's already been talked about. But in many churches, especially myself as a worship leader for, 15, 20 years, we would come together and we would pray, expecting and inviting the Holy Spirit. And the set, we would have a set, but then it would take different directions as we listened to what was happening in the crowd, right? So we kind of went with the songs that brought the move of the Spirit, I guess, when we sensed that God was there. And then the worship leader would say prompts, to increase that energy. And it's similar. Hey, it's similar to to going to a concert almost, right? When we go to concerts, that induces, hey, to a concert, that kind of induces a sense of emotion. And so what I saw with my own worship experience and with the worship experience with the people around me when we were in it, is that it became almost entertainment. We'd go to church and we would show up to the service that we enjoyed the worship band at, because they were more accomplished. And worship became something to worship, the act of worship. And we lost the whole thing about what worship was conceptually, that it is not just music. It's a lifestyle response to who Jesus is. And I always said when I led worship that I would prefer to be out with the congregation, just sitting out there, and just having the music up there. And we all just do this thing together, as opposed to putting people up front that were very accomplished musicians. So it's kind of like that output thing. When you put something out, it's an energy exchange almost. And is that in service, to the congregation and service to Jesus? Or is that in service to the culture of the church?
Well,
got anything to say about that, Dave?
I got plenty to say about that, but I'm not going to say it all.
Okay.
I will say that my experience in Pentecostal or charismatic churches fueled a lot of my feelings about emotion, because I saw what you're seeing, which was a ginning up of emotion as a marker that we were ginning up the Spirit's presence. The more emotion there was, the more people emoted, then we said there was more spirit in the room. And then it became a thing where you had to top what you did last week. Mm-hmm. And I just saw it as a kind of subverting of what it was that we were all about. But having said that, if it's working, if it's not broke, you don't fix it. It's not the cultural style of the music or the way that it's done that is necessarily the problem. It's the intent. I mean, what is the real intent here? And I think the intent can get lost. It can get muddied by a lot of the accolades that come to the people on stage, and then the whole thing gets self-fulfilling and back to front. But it's not necessarily the style that is the problem. It's where it kind of goes. And I don't think that Nouwen is talking about the worship experience proper. He's talking about people just in their daily lives. He's talking about ministers as they work, outside of just the Sunday morning experience, and how many words they use, and this constant stream of words that tend to dissipate and to just empty us out and burn us out. But I see what I know the experience exactly. We've talked about this before, and it was very confusing to me when I first started working in church leadership and in the worship team, because I saw this discrepancy, and it was spinning my head around like Linda Blair, and I really didn't know what I was supposed to do with it or how I was supposed to react. But and yes, it can be very much what he's talking about, or it can be done with all sincerity and with a pure heart. So it just kind of depends on what's going on. I know
what you're bringing to the party. Absolutely.
Absolutely. The same style, the same basic competency of the musicians can be done beautifully, or it can be done poorly. And that has nothing to do with the competency of the music, or even, and this is important, it doesn't have anything to do with the experience of the worshipers. They could be having a genuine experience, no matter the ego of those who are on stage. And so we have to keep that in mind too, that the Spirit is going to work in spite of us sometimes in people's lives if we just show up and do what we do. Yeah, it was disillusioning for me too, trying to navigate that whole cultural thing.
I mean, it's a case for the chanting thing. You know how in the Catholic Church, you've got chanters, and even in other religions and stuff, where it's minimal words to get that, to help bring the mind in focus and stuff. And I don't know. Sorry if I went off.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah.
What page are we on? Sorry.
52.
Okay. Thanks.
52. All right. Any other comments? Any other thoughts? William is having way too much fun. over there.
Yes, I think you should play more music. Encores.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that.
Okay, Dave, just a clarification. Could you repeat what you said about spirit not being emotion?
Oh, probably not. No, not exactly. But let me put it this way. Spirit, by definition, stands outside of physicality, right? And since emotions are physical, it's neurochemistry that we're feeling, spirituality is beneath that or transcends that. And so our spiritual encounters can be accompanied by emotional response, but not necessarily so. And so.
How does that fit with God and the whole message of Jesus being love? Isn't love an emotion?
No, not the way we're defining it. Remember, we talked about love not being an emotion or a feeling, and not even being loving behavior, quote unquote, but by being identification with the beloved. To identify with the beloved, to see them as an extension of ourselves, to connect with them at such a level that we realize that anything done to them is as if it was done to us. Remember, the highest form of love that Jesus claimed for us was love of the enemy. By definition, the enemy is the one that you don't have any affection for, any feelings of connection with. They are the one who is other. But if you can still see identification with them as a fellow human being who deserves everything that you deserve, then out of that connection flows what we call loving behavior. And if that loving behavior is practiced long enough, out of that can flow feelings of affection, even for the one that you really didn't like at the beginning. So we're not defining love at this point as an emotion, but emotions are a byproduct or an effect of the cause of love, just as the behavior is.
I think that
No?
lead to some confusion because, oh, I'm sorry.
You're muted.
Go ahead, Brady.
No, not me.
Oh, sorry.
I think that could lead to some confusion because I think where we most frequently experience what we call love, it's with someone that's not our enemy. It's someone we're close to, someone we're in relationship to. And when we truly love them, I think that is most generally accompanied by some kind of an emotion. And so I think emotion is present when we are loving them and know that we're loving them, conscious of loving them. I think there can also be times, though, when it's difficult to love someone. It could be in moments of conflict with someone with whom you're close, or it could be just in relationship to someone you don't understand. And you can realize that there's love there, even though at this moment it can actually be painful to love them. It can be painful to identify with someone. So I think emotions of one sort or another frequently accompany the loving. But I understand what you're saying. It's not the emotion that defines the love.
And you're absolutely right, Brady. Absolutely right. But if we think that we have to wait until we feel affection for someone before we can love them, we could be waiting a really long time for some of that, you know? And the Aramaic makes things a little clearer because there's two different words for love that Jesus uses. One is for love of the neighbor, and the other is for love of the enemy. Two different words. Now we just use the same word, so it even gets more confusing. But rahem, when Jesus says love your neighbor, rahem, that actually the root word is the word for a woman's womb, a uterus. And so the idea is that this is love that comes from deep inside, like a woman, a mother loves her child. It's just effortless, it flows, it's full of devotion and connection and all sorts of affection and emotion. But when he talks about loving the enemy, he uses the word hab. And hab literally at the root means to kindle a fire. You probably heard me say this story before, but to kindle a fire or germinate a seed. And we think, okay, what does that have to do with love? Well, the idea is that if you're kindling a fire, taking a bunch of dried, dead twigs and things, and you arrange them just so, and you're carefully sparking them and you're adding other dried, dead kindling. And if you tend it well, eventually you've got a roaring flame. And the same thing with a germinating seed. You've got this dead husk of the thing, but under the right conditions, it sprouts and it grows. And so the idea is that you're starting with nothing. You're starting with dead things, absolutely no feeling whatsoever. But if you show up and you tend it and you're perseverant, it can grow into a tree that shelters or a fire that warms. So those images in the language itself helps to understand the way that love is experienced between people that we have affection for and feel connection with and those that we don't. But Jesus is saying that the love should be indiscriminate. This is the way your Father loves, absolutely indiscriminately. The rain falls on the just and the unjust and the righteous and the evil alike, you know? And so he's trying to get us reacculturated to redefine love for ourselves so that we don't tie it to ethnicity or tribal connections or love and affection or affection and sentimentality as we typically do.
So was Jesus in essence also trying to redefine the language that they used, you know, saying
No, he was using language as they commonly understood it, Mike. It's we don't understand the language.
So he was saying there should be no difference then between rehav and ahav.
No, experientially, there's a huge difference. Absolutely. And he's accentuating that by using those two words specifically for those two different types of experience. The idea, though, is that it gets you to the same place eventually, but it starts with two very different experiences. Does that make sense, Mike?
Yeah.
And that's really the point, that we're going to experience it so differently. One is full of emotion and the other is devoid of emotion. Or if it has any emotion at all, it's negative, it's disgust, it's hatred, it's animosity. To try to overcome that by still seeing the identification as a human being underneath all of that, now we're starting to see with the Father's eyes. And that's where Jesus is trying to take us.
So
Are you buying
Dave,
any of this, Becky? Looks like maybe, maybe not.
I need to think about it. It's a
Okay.
different way of,
Yeah,
you know what I was thinking? Where's Marion? I need her.
I
It's like,
know. I know.
um,
She's so wiped out when she gets home that she's been not attending. But yeah, she doesn't.
which is fine, but you know why I said that?
Yeah,
Because,
because she doesn't like this definition.
yeah, yeah.
But you know, I don't. Yeah, and you guys don't have to. You don't have to adopt it. You're free to say, Dave, you're all full of S on this one, and we love you, but you know, no thanks. And that's absolutely fine. And if you take that route, then just know that whatever you adopt, whatever viewpoint you adopt, is going to answer some questions, and then it's going to beg others. And so, you know, choose your poison. Now, for me, this makes the most sense, and I feel that it follows the language and the passages in the Gospels in the New Testament. But it's, you know, it's not mandatory. It's just what I am convinced of at this point. But
I think what's hard for me is, and maybe it's pseudo, maybe I just think I'm experiencing something I'm not, but when I'm with someone and I feel love toward them, and it doesn't have to be someone maybe someone I've just met. There's an experience that goes with it that feels like unity, that feels like
There she is.
union. Hey,
I heard my.
we need you.
Hi.
It feels like connection, unity, union, like, and the feeling I have is like God is present, God is there. And that's where I talk about, like, it's easier for me to feel God's love when I'm with someone, where it's like it comes through. It's almost like an energy kind of experience, and that may just be my own weird quirky thing that I don't know how to articulate very well. But
Well, let me ask you this, Becky, and I can believe this of you. Is there no one you don't like?
oh, there's this one person.
All right. Let's get into it. Let's get
Oh,
into
Doug,
no, you forbid me for talking about him.
it. So if there's one person you don't like, can you still love this person?
I can
By
have
seeing him as a-
compassion.
What's that?
I can have compassion
Okay.
for this person when I understand somewhat his history. I'm learning how to have compassion for that, the history and the trauma that probably created this person who does, in my opinion, really harsh, evil things.
Now, if this is a person that I'm thinking it is, if it's a person who's remote from you and someone you're
Yes.
not going to meet or be in daily communication with, then it kind of messes up the point, because we're really talking, Jesus is always talking in the micro context. So he's
Yeah.
talking about people that you're going to be in contact with. How do you love them if you don't like them, if you don't see them as someone of your tribe and someone you understand and connect with?
Well, let me use it, and this is probably not fair because Frank too isn't here, but let me just use that as an example. I love that guy, but I didn't start out loving him. I started out being annoyed by Frank too,
Okay.
because we had very different political views.
Mhm.
And there was one particular group where we got into it a little bit. And there was just this shift in me where I realized everything he was feeling emotionally with this last election was what I was feeling at the election before. And boom, it happened. It was like in that moment, I realized, oh, this guy's great. And it was because of that connection around understanding him differently, understanding that he's emotional. And so I just give that as an example.
That's perfect. Okay, that's perfect. Now think about it this way. Before you had that moment of connection, when you
Yes.
felt something for him, when you were still annoyed by him,
Yeah.
how did you love him? Do you feel you did? And if so, how did you do it?
I had to work at it.
And what
I
did
had
you do to work at it? What did you
I
do?
talked to myself and I said, Becky, no, it's what, like, you don't know everything. You don't know, because for me, when I get to know someone, it usually just happens.
Mhm.
And so I just talked to myself and I just decided that I just needed to know him better. And Frank too was great. He stayed with me. He stayed engaged.
And that, Becky, is hub. That is that type of love. You continued to treat him respectfully. You treated him civilly in all of our meetings here. And you continued to stay engaged with him. You didn't give up on him. You didn't completely shut him out. And eventually you got to a place of understanding that had some emotional content to it. But before that, you at least treated him like a fellow human being, right?
Well, yeah.
That's love. That is hub. That is the growing of that love. And now it's growing to a place where you can say you actually like him. You respect him and you have some feelings of affection for him.
Well, why isn't that spirit? Why isn't that God's spirit?
Of
What am I not getting? Help me.
Of course, that's God's spirit. You know, it didn't have any emotional content at the beginning, but because you stayed with it, first the behavior followed your desire to just want to know him better and to stop any of your own, compulsions from coming out.
Judgments.
Right? You kept the lid on those things. You stayed with it. Eventually, you treated him well, and then eventually, you had this connection with him. That's the whole process, and spirit is infused all over that. I'm not saying that wasn't a spiritual encounter. It was a spiritual encounter, but it preceded your emotions. That's my point. The love started before the emotions kicked in. The emotions are, to me, an effect of the cause of love, not the cause itself. We can have love without emotion, but it's always more beautiful when they coincide. And they eventually will if we stay with it.
Okay,
All right.
I've taken enough time. I think it might be semantics. I think I just have.
It could be, and the only, maybe the only reason that I make this distinction and harp on it is kind of because of what Danielle brought up, because I've seen it done so badly, where the emotion is the be all and end all of our spiritual connection with God, and we end up chasing the emotion. I mean, if you aren't holy laughter, if you aren't frothing at the mouth, if you aren't writhing on the floor, if you aren't hands raised and transfixed in some sort of trance, then you are not born again. You're not of the spirit. You don't love God. I've seen that card played over and over again, and that's not me. I'm not that, expressive a guy emotionally because of my background. I'm a little bit aspy, so it's not going to come that way. And so what was wrong with me? And I tried to fit that mold so hard. I tried to make it happen. And then I just realized, what was I doing? I don't need to. So maybe it's more my bugaboo than anybody else's. And so if this is not something that is feeding your spiritual formation, then please feel free to put it on the shelf. It's not that important. But since I've made a big deal of this in the past, I wanted to hit this religious emotion, because what are we talking about there? And I think it is the opposite of feeling burned out. It's feeling invigorated. It's feeling like there's meaning and purpose and there's conviction, and you feel energized by your religious emotion. That's just the phrase that he's using here, but I think that's the feeling. And we know what that's like, and we know when we don't have it. And his point is, if we talk too much, if we're constantly just blurting everything out, that we are in danger of losing that fire within. So, Kathy, we cut you off a while back. What were you going to say, dear? Does it matter anymore?
We don't need to go into great detail, but I was just trying to think of an example as well when Becky was talking about this, and it may not be fair, because I'm thinking of a parent that has maybe an adult child that by nature they love that child, but I've seen friends of mine who have adult children that those children just absolutely disgust that parent, and they have difficult times with them, and they're so angry at them, but they don't give up. And it's not really, I guess it's emotion to some extent, but I know deep down I still love this person, but I don't know how to deal with them, or I cannot get around this, or they've done so many things to betray me or whatnot. So I mean, I was trying to think if that was kind of an example of that, maybe that hob. And again, maybe it's not the same with the child, because you deep down you really always love a child, but I don't know. It's just as a thought I had of an example. So, and I know, Becky, when I think of people that kind of are difficult to like, two things come to my mind. I always say everybody's a child of God, and forgive them, God, they know what they do. And then it gets me out of saying I really don't like that person, or I just don't like the way they behave, or I don't like what they're about, or whatever. So kind of saying, okay, we're all children of God, forgive them, they do not know what they do. It's an easy out for the moment anyway. But
yeah, I always remember there's this one young woman that would come to our group sessions early on in the effect, 13, 14 years ago. And she came in and told the story that there was this one coworker, this woman, that she just couldn't stand. As soon as she came around the corner of the cubicles, her blood would start to boil. And everything about her just irritated the heck out of her. And she realized she had a choice. She could either act on the emotions that she felt, or she could kill her with kindness. And she chose to kill her with kindness, to just go the absolute opposite way, to really go overboard and just be nice to this person. And then she said, now we're best of friends. You know, that's Hob. And it's a decision that you make, because there's no emotional content. It's not welling up out of your womb. You know, it's not transporting you. You just make a decision because of the basic humanity of the person that you identify with, to treat them as you would want to be treated yourself. You just use reciprocity, just use the golden rule. But out of that can come a best friend. You know, there's that psalm that talks about heaping hot coals on the head of your enemies, which is an idiomatic expression for, you know, killing someone with kindness and making them feel the hot shame of their own actions towards you in the face of your repeated kindness, and therefore destroy your enemies by turning them into friends. You know, there's that whole idea. It's in the Old Testament as well as
there's also the opposite of that too, Dave. I see an opposite example where I could meet someone or know someone maybe in a work environment and say, this person is valuable to be on this team because they know X, Y, and Z, and we need them here. But I am never going to be friends with this person. They're not going to be best friends. We're not going to go out for drinks or do anything like that. But I can respect that this person is going to be on the team, and that's the boundary and the limit of our relationship. So I guess if that's kind of like a real distant love with no emotion, in a sense, I respect what they're about and what they can offer, but I'm not going to go farther beyond that and become best friends with them. It's just a boundary that I would probably
perfect.
build.
Thanks for bringing that up, because that's going to be love of the enemy, because you're still loving them. You're still treating them with respect and dignity, and wishing the best for them, hoping that their career takes them where they want to go, especially if it's out of your office, right? Yeah. And yet there's no emotional content, and yet there's still love. And I think that's the distinction that I've been trying to make. Wow, I didn't think we talked this long on that. This is cool. I love when this happens. All right. Well, Becky, think on it. All of you think on it. You don't need to end up where I am, certainly. You know, there's a couple of areas like this. They tend to cluster around emotion, where Marianne and I just agree to disagree. We look at things differently. And this is one of them. And it's okay. We're still married. We're still okay. You know, we just don't agree on this particular thing, you know? So, but in wherever you do land, define for yourself, become convinced for yourself, what does it mean to love the enemy then? Because that is going to be the question. If you can't love the enemy, then you've missed the whole point of what the Father's love is all about. Because if you can't feel a connection with someone that you don't like or don't have any connection with, then you'll never really trust that God can love you when you know that you're being unlovely. And that really is the point. We will trust the Father's love when we can see it in action in our own lives. That's when it all comes together and becomes one thing. So it's really important, however you define it, however you experience it, that you know that there is a difference between loving the enemy and loving the neighbor, and that you can do both.
One more thing on this topic.
Go ahead.
At this wedding we were at, I had a great deal of animosity toward my nephew's, his wife now, their family. They believe all the conspiracy theories. They do not vaccinate. I was very angry with them because, and I didn't know any of them, right? This is all just, you know, knowing from my sister and family members what was going on. My granddaughter couldn't go. My daughter-in-law, my daughter's two little ones, you know, couldn't go because of the scare. You know, they're this is 5 and 3 years old. And they couldn't, you know, they can't be vaccinated. So I went in. I mean, really, just like, you know, I was just like, ooh, you know, how you are just so opposite from me. You believe all this crap and They kind of bought into the Obama and Barack and Michelle were killing children, and I mean all this crazy stuff. And so I went in pretty, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but when I sat right beside the mom at one of the first dinners outside, thank God, and I had a wonderful conversation. And so, and with others of her family as well. And so then I was like guilt ridden because I had such disgust for these people. And it's like, well, I'll be darned, we had a wonderful conversation, and they're very kind people. It was an interesting thing for me because mostly I do not associate with people like that. And I, have a hard time even, trying to love the enemy. But I don't know, something happened there. There was I guess Becky or somebody said there was a unity, even though we're polar opposites on many, many issues. There was still this unity, and the mother of the girl my nephew married, at the reception came over and told me a very beautiful story about when she and her husband were walking down the aisle, and she came over specifically to tell me that because we had talked about it, and she confided it in me in this first dinner together sitting beside her. So anyway, this was kind of neat for me because it's like, oh, okay, these people are like Kathy, like, they're God's children, and they do not know what they're doing, but I can like them and love them in this way. So it was really kind of a beautiful experience for me, and I tried to get over my guilt, and just tried to effuse kindness and love toward these people, which I never thought that I could do. But I think it's only because I'm trying, and these sessions are helping me, see where I fall short and where I need to kind of, push a little bit, and relying on God to help me through that. So thank you for listening.
Well, that's perfect, Beth. That is the epitome of Hob, of love of the enemy, But it turns out the enemy is something that we gin up in our own minds, right? Mm-hmm. It's our mind making those judgments again, holding people against certain standards. And when we actually meet them, if we will approach them undefended and actually let them in enough, we find out it's just another beating heart. It's just another human being. And they have different thoughts about different things, but you can always find a common ground if you're willing to look for it. And you did. And that's perfect. That's what we're talking about here. So
David made me think of a Russ Hudson line from one of our Enneagram trainings, where he talked about this idea that the closest we can get to truth mentally is perspective, but truth can only be experienced in the heart. And if we can think through the heart, we will always get to that deeper truth. And you'll always have a different perspective from your people in different political parties and different conspiracy beliefs and so on and so forth. And you might not even like them at times. But if you're thinking through the heart, then you can still make that connection, basically.
That's perfect. And it follows right in line. Remember what we read from the Cloud of Unknowing a few weeks ago? That God can't be approached through the intellect, through our thoughts. Truth as a person, because ultimate truth is a person, it's a person of God. but you can't pierce the cloud of unknowing with your intellect. But what you can do, if you're willing to put everything you think you know underneath the cloud of forgetting, you can embrace God in love. And I think that's exactly the same thing that Hudson is saying here. You know, it's the same idea. And it's what Beth just described, you know, what Kathy described, what Becky described, is submerging the thoughts that are keeping you separate from someone and letting the heart just connect. You know, even if that doesn't translate into a positive emotion at the moment, you're still allowing that person to at least be seen by you, which is everything, right? Because everything is going to flow from that undefended encounter. And that's what loving the enemy is all about. It's still approaching someone undefended, allowing yourself to be vulnerable and open, even if you don't feel that they're necessarily trustworthy yet, you know, but you're willing to take a chance.
It kind of comes back to the macro and the micro again.
Very much
What you
so.
were just saying.
Yeah. Okay, so we got 15 minutes left. I would like to let Frank do some reading. Otherwise, you will all be accusing me of going backward this evening, because we got a long ways to go just to catch up to where we were last week. But let's let Frank just read the next page and a half. And I think because we did so much discussion, I'm thinking that what Frank's gonna read is gonna make a lot more sense to you, all right? And won't need a lot of discussion or any. Go ahead, Frank.
Before you go, Frank, it's Julie. I was just gonna say good night. I've got another call I've got to hop on, but I will see you next week.
Okay, dear. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
Julie.
Hey, Julie.
Diadochus of Photiki offers us a very concrete image. When the door of the steam bath is continually left open, the heat inside rapidly escapes through it. Likewise, the soul, in its desire to say many things, dissipates its remembrance of God through the door of speech, even though everything it says may be good. Thereafter, the intellect, though lacking appropriate ideas, pours out a welter of confused thoughts to anyone it meets, as it no longer has the Holy Spirit to keep its understanding free from fantasy. Ideas of value always shun verbosity, being foreign to confusion and fantasy. Timely silence, then, is precious, for it is nothing less than the mother of the wisest thoughts.
Just got to pull your attention to ideas of value always shun verbosity. That's one that's worthy of the refrigerator. Put that one on your fridge. That's a great line. Ideas of value always shun verbosity, being foreign to confusion and fantasy. Very nice. Go ahead, Frank.
These words of Diadochus go against the grain of our contemporary lifestyle, in which sharing has become one of the greatest virtues. We have been made to believe that feelings, emotions, and even the inner stirrings of our soul have to be shared with others. Expressions such as, "Thanks for sharing this with me," or "It was good to share this with you," show that the door of our steam bath is open most of the time. In fact, people who prefer to keep to themselves, and do not expose their interior life tend to create uneasiness and are often considered inhibited, asocial, or simply odd. But let us at least raise the question of whether our lavish ways of sharing are not more compulsive than virtuous. But instead of creating community, they tend to flatten out our life together. Often we come home from a sharing session with a feeling that something precious has been taken away from us, or that holy ground has been trodden upon. James Henry, commenting on the sayings of the Desert Fathers, writes, "The mouth is not a door through which any evil enters. The ears are such doors as are the eyes. The mouth is a door only for exit." What was it that they, the Desert Fathers, feared to let go out? What was it which someone might steal out of their hearts, as a thief takes a steed from the stable when the door is left open? It can be else than the force of religious emotion. What needs to be
Okay,
guarded
but
is
wait,
the life of the spirit.
hold on a second, Frank. I don't know if everything broke up for you, but it broke up for me. That last line, it can have been nothing else than the force of religious emotion. So again, what they're worried about, if the steam bath of the mouth, the steam bath door of the mouth is open, is that what is going to be dissipated, what is going out, is going to be this sense of zeal and conviction and fervor and furious longing, all of those things that we need to guard and not let dissipate so that we end up burning out. And I think there's something to say for that. But again, remember that we want to keep it in balance. It's not that we're not going to share it all, but that we're going to find a balance in the middle. Just like with Danielle talking about worship, find the balance in the middle. Yes, if we're going to worship musically, we want to be excellent. And we at least want to be good enough that we're not taking anything away by our inadequacy in music, right? Our incompetency in music, just as much as we don't want to stand out or try to call attention to ourselves. We want to find that middle ground where we can be excellent, but also not self-aggrandizing at the same time. We want to share, we want to connect, but not so much that we lose the sense of that inner fire. So it's that middle ground that we're shooting for all the time. Okay, keep going, Frank.
What needs to be guarded is the life of the Spirit within us, especially we who want to witness to the presence of God's Spirit in the world need to tend the fire within with utmost care. It is not so strange that many ministers have become burnt out cases, people who say many words and share many experiences, but in whom the fire of God's Spirit has died, and from whom not much more comes forth than their own boring, petty ideas and feelings. Sometimes it seems that our many words are more an expression of our doubt than of our faith. It is as if we are not sure that God's Spirit can touch the hearts of people. We have to help him out and, with many words, convince others of his power. But it is precisely this wordy unbelief that quenches the fire.
That was reminding me of Jesus saying that when you pray, don't use a lot of words like the Gentiles do, right? Because God already knows what you need before you ask him. God is already pretty present. He's already pretty much read into whatever we're going to be trying to bring to him. And so we just need to allude to it, really. We don't really need to tell him every jot and tittle. Now, maybe that does our own hearts some good, processing out loud with God, nothing wrong with that either. But there's going to be a difference between those two, I think. And so this is, again, part of the balance that we need to try to strike here. And sometimes it sounds like Nouwen is really pulling the pendulum to one side. And maybe he is, but for a reason, because the other side is so well developed. And so he's presenting the opposite of that. But we need to remember that the proper position is always going to be balanced in the middle, not going to one extreme or another. Just important to remember. All right, Frank, keep going. We're on a roll.
Our first and foremost task is faithfully to care for the inward fire so that when it is really needed, it can offer warmth and light to lost travelers. Nobody expressed this with more conviction than the Dutch painter Vincent van Gogh. There may be a great fire in our soul, yet no one ever comes to warm himself at it. And the passerby only see a wisp of smoke coming through the chimney and go along their way. Look here, now what must be done? Must one tend the inner fire, have salt in oneself, wait patiently, yet with how much impatience, for the hour when someone will come and sit down, maybe to stay. Let him who believes in God wait for the hour that will come sooner or later. Vincent van Gogh speaks here with the mind and heart of the Desert Fathers. He knew about the temptation to open all the doors so that passerby could see the fire and not just the smoke coming through the chimney. But he also realized that if this happened, the fire would die and nobody would find warmth and new strength. His own life is a powerful example of faithfulness to the inner fire. During his life, nobody came to sit down at his fire. But today, thousands have found comfort and consolation in his drawings, paintings, and letters.
So do you see the concept, the image that Van Gogh is trying to get across here? He's saying, obviously, you know, he had an inner fire that was out of control, you know, caused him to finally snap and cut his ear off and all the things that he's famous for. But he had that passion. He had such a fire burning within. And yet he realized that, you know, it wasn't something that he needed or should wear on his sleeve or try to promote. It kind of reminded me of the tradition in AA of attraction and not promotion, you know, that people will be attracted to what you have if you're living according to your passion, living according to your religious emotion. And so, or like Francis of Assisi, preach the gospel continuously, use words where necessary. Again, the brevity, living your life so that people will come to you, and then you've got something to talk about. And he uses that one line, have salt in yourselves. So I'm all about salt now since the last 2 Sundays, right? So it just reminded me of Mark 9:50, where Jesus says, have salt in yourselves, have peace among one another. And in the way of Jewish poetry, it's 2 concepts that really are saying the same thing. If you have salt with somebody, then that means you're having peace with them. Salt was used to ratify treaties. It was the desire and the wish for the wellness, the health, the prosperity of the other one, to share salt. And so salt was common on the table. Salt was used to ratify treaties. So when he says, have salt in yourself and have peace among yourselves, then he's saying, first have peace within yourself so that you can then share that peace with one another. Find the contentment within, find the stability within, find the ability to live your life without having to see it through the validation of others, so that you can have the peace and the strength of your convictions that allow you to be the kind of partner in a treaty or the kind of partner in anything where you can actually have peace among each other. That's what Jesus is saying is all about. And Van Gogh is using it here and saying, if you're going to do this, if you're going to just let people see the wisp of smoke out your chimney and not try to open all the windows and doors so they can see what you're all about, you know, people need to see what I'm all about. They need to understand me. I need to be, you know, I need to be heard. I need to be validated. If that compulsion can be put down enough because you have enough of that sense of yourself inside, then the model of your life is going to attract the people that you can really talk to. And I think that's exactly what he's talking about. And that's what Nouwen is trying to get across as well. It's that idea that we are convinced of what we're convinced of, and we're living our lives accordingly, whether anybody sees it or not. And we're willing to be silent when silence is called for, but we're willing to speak our convictions when the time arises and it's appropriate, but not overly so. Thoughts on that one? Am I barking up the wrong tree again? Or does that sound like it's got some validity to it? I say, I'm just trying to parse what I think Nouwen's talking about, and Van Gogh for that matter.
I think it's about how we live our life. You know, it's about in the communication literature, when there's a discrepancy between the verbal and the nonverbal communication, people will always believe, what, you know, 90%, the nonverbal. You know, you can say, spew out as many words as you want, but in fact, for small children, this can be, you know, a real problem in terms of, you know, mental illness, according to some of the early research. So I think it's about how the effect of our life and how we live without having to, you know, be like Jesus was talking about, you know, don't pray, you know, stand on the corner and, you know, pray out loud, or I can't remember that whole verse, but it's about our actions and That's
Mhm.
for me anyway, of a lot of this.
Use words where necessary.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. All right. Well, chew on this for a few days, and if something comes up, maybe write it down and bring it into next week's session so that we can kick it around. If a thought comes up, or an objection, or a what if, or a yeah, but, those are the things that we really want to talk about in here, because that's where, Becky's what if, yeah, but is what really was able to put a much finer point on these ideas. And wherever you end up on them, you're only going to be made richer by having had that conversation. So please bring those objections in, at least make me earn my dough. All right. Yeah. Okay. Scotty, give us a closing prayer and we're out of here.
All right, Father God, thank you so much for always being wherever we are, whether we're in the midst of tribulation or in the midst of celebration. We always know you've got our back, our sides, in every direction we can travel. Thanks for your loving, kind instruction and care and provision and plan for our salvation. Help us to gain as much knowledge that will be good for us and allow us to really treat each other the way you originally intended when we do these studies and exchange our experiences and information. Thanks for loving us, Lord. It's in your name that we give our thanks and pray. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, everybody. This was a
All
good
right,
one.
guys.
Yeah. All right. We will see you on Sunday. Some of you.
Bye, Kathy. See you Sunday.
Good night, guys.
Good night, everybody.
Bye, Beth. Bye,
Yeah.
Brady.
Frank and Scott, you guys be good this weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. We'll try not to kill ourselves.
Yeah, try not to.
See you later, guys.
Bye,
All
Scott.
right, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, Jordana. Bye, Linda. See you guys Sunday.
Okay, see you guys. See you Sunday. Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.